Welcome to the Future Peaks podcast. I'm your host, Dario Martino, and our guest today is Deepak Puthiyedath. Deepak is the managing architect of Branchspace, where he plays a key role in driving digital transformation for the airline industry. With extensive expertise in digital product design, Deepak has helped organizations build efficient operating models for their digital products from conceptualization to delivery. Welcome, Deepak. Hi, Deepak. Thank you for being here today, taking the time to talk to us. So let's start. Could you tell us a bit about your background and what drew you to join Branchspace?
My background is in functional and technical architecture, and more broadly, enterprise architecture. I spent my early days in product development and consulting with Oracle and IBM on their CRM and ERP systems. And the first time I entered the airline domain is when I designed and delivered an NDC aggregation platform for another client. And the Branchspace opportunity came right after that. I'm glad I took it was almost like a lucky surprise, and I'm glad I took the jump because it's been exciting to work on some complex consulting assignments, especially into a domain which I started having a liking for, airline domain. The depth of expertise in Branchspace is quite inspiring. That has been my experience.
And how has been the general experience working with us? And how would you describe the culture and vision of Branchspace from your perspective?
Yeah, like I said, I joined Branchspace with as a lucky surprise, and it has been an inspiring experience. I see that the assignments that we have in Branchspace is typically quite broad and quite challenging, with timelines that would keep the challenge up. But what makes it easy in Branchspace is working with the colleagues that we have, who often have decades of expertise with the airline domain. Even sometimes the specific airline project that we are doing, they have that context of the airline. And to work through the culture of collaboration that we have in Branchspace, you can reach out to any colleague, ask a question, and be guided. Working on that collaboration has been quite enjoyable, regardless of the complexity of the project. That's what makes delivering a project for Branchspace easy.
Great to hear that. So airlines are increasingly turning to digital solutions to enhance their retailing strategies. From your experience, what do you see as the most significant trends driving this digital transformation in the airline industry right now?
My own experience has been with commercial transformations in the commercial space. And the biggest changes I'm seeing is that airlines are now rethinking and realigning their sales and servicing channels to align to where the industry is broadly going. And almost all airlines that I know of are working on some project or the other, maybe multiple projects in the pipeline that are addressing that need. And I'm not just talking about NDC, right? So NDC, as everybody knows, it's not just NDC. They're looking at cross-channel, of which NDC is a part of it, and introducing a standardized retailing or industry-led retailing, personalized retailing services for passengers across the channels. Now, because airlines are doing that, I can see that digital systems that are underpinning some of these channels are also being reviewed, are being transformed, replaced, the driving force being the shift towards offer and order management. Again, if I take one more step further, replacing these digital systems in the commercial transformations also expects the airlines to take a look at their product definitions, make them more agile, add more richer content, introduce context-sensitive pricing, and look at their partnerships in code sharing and interlining so that they can provide the right product for the right customer at the right price. And I'm quoting that from a project that I'm working on at the moment. And of course, airlines are also looking into payment solutions, as I'm aware, although I'm not personally working on any of these. So they are trying to make sure that there are modern payment options available for the customers. And in all this, I can see a presence of IATA's standards and initiatives, some of which I've been involved in Branchspace, with IATA coordinating across airlines future capabilities. And all of this is what I'm exposed to. So airlines, the digital transformation is the hot topic in any airline.
And what are some of the most common challenges airlines face when it comes to their retailing platforms? And how can they overcome this challenge?
I guess the primary challenge, and probably the root of most of these challenges, is that the functional models on which airlines operate are quite old, and the systems that work for the airlines for these models, like for example, tickets for travel, the functional models are quite legacy, and these systems work very well for that legacy model. But that model is not conducive to having a modern retailing experience. So having to not just change the systems, but go back and then reevaluate the functional model is the primary challenge in any of the transformation initiatives. So airlines are now having to rethink their entire product life cycles while they're transforming their systems. And all of this that we are talking about revamping their functional models, replacing, looking at product life cycles, transforming systems, is an effort to just get up to speed on what the passenger typically expects as a retailing and a personalization experience. Then comes the initiatives that would actually look at the increased availability of data. How do we utilize that data, introduce AI into the mix so that they can provide better experience, better pricing. So that while they catch up, they have to look at what can data do for us? What can AI do for us? So it makes the whole problem definition a bit more complex. I can give an example on a project I'm working on in revenue management. There are active conversations about offer data streams. So all the offers that are generated for customers, that is a rich data stream on which better pricing can be provided. Airlines do look at order data streams in the past, but they now have a much more vast data stream of offers. How do we use it? Or how do we price our ancillaries? This is in summary a very high level view of the challenges that I see in airlines. And then I guess the answer to that question is, okay, how do we tackle these challenges? A strategic approach could be to start thinking on any solution, what data are we talking about? What data do we need? What data do we generate? And start thinking in those lines for any initiative is what I think the airlines should be doing, because a few years from now, it'll all be about data, because the systems that can deal with that volume of data exist today.
Now, I know we emphasize an API-first approach in product development. How does this benefit airlines looking to create more agile and scalable digital retail solutions? Could you give some examples of how API-first strategy has worked in any project?
I think any solution, in any modern solution that any organization comes up with, have to have that product lens on top of it, even if it's not truly a product as you would recognize. And the design of it should be an API first approach. I'll give an example. The NDC aggregator platform that I referred to in my introduction about my background, the original thinking around that was, yes, we need to build an NDC aggregator. The aggregator platform itself has to be looked at as a product. And imagine there are no UIs for this. There are no UIs that or user interfaces that the users would go to. How would we define an API set, including the NDC APIs that they need to deal with? How do we define an API set that represents the organization? We started with that and then said, within this organization, here is this product. And how do we now represent a set of APIs efficiently, meaning not taking years to develop it? How do we now have a mechanism? And we decided on using GraphQL as an API definition strategy, using GraphQL in the strategy, which basically meant that we now can create a graph for the NDC APIs, a graph for the product, the booking product or the booking platform product, and an entire graph for the organization. So having the ability to have super graphs makes it very easy for teams to collaborate. All that two different divisions are when they are trying to collaborate, all they need to ask is which part of the graph should I access, and get the access, and they would have that. And extending a graph is very natural, and you're able to make connections with the APIs that you already have. So that strategy has proved to the aggregator that they can actually come up with a web-based interface in the beginning. The same sort of APIs, the graph is available for mobile apps. So it makes it easy to have one set of consistent view of an organization as an API designed organization. So I think every organization should consider, because fundamentally the need is to be agile and to be able to connect to other organizations. I think the go-to approach there is APIs.
And what are the key elements that airlines need to focus on when building a digital platform from the ground up? Are there any specific technologies or frameworks you recommend to create a robust, future-proof system?
I think this is going to be a very long list, and I'm very conscious that the technology choices that will come off the top of my head would be very opinionated. But I think if you step back a bit before choosing a technology, I think for airlines, it's quite important to keep an open mind about adopting technology and solutions, especially for the digital platform, because the solutions that they need to come up with, the speed at which they need to come up with those solutions, the technology that the airline may already be familiar with may not be the right answer. It may not be the right solution for the cloud approach that they might take. So they have to closely look at reusing technology that they have. And I also think that buy decisions should be given equal importance over build decisions, because build has been approach in the last 2 decades or more. Buy decisions of SaaS solutions that are available in the market should be considered. So that'll be the introduction that I would say to choosing technology. And then, like I said, investing in an API strategy and a scaling API platform will make sure that the teams can collaborate, development is faster. Most organizations will have to choose a cloud when choosing to build solutions on the cloud. It's important to realize that clouds today provide either directly infrastructure or a platform, but there are still frameworks on top of it that would help make solution development much quicker. For example, if you look at elastic compute, which is a mechanism for providing servers in AWS. There is a framework from AWS itself called Copilot, which will make it very easy for developers to consume ECS without having to know the deep technical knowledge of ECS, but use it to the fullest extent. So such frameworks should be evaluated. Function as a service becomes very much important in solutions these days. So serverless framework, not the paradigm, but there is a framework called serverless that makes that API designs with function as a service very easy. And I think for most purposes, airlines should evaluate, not just airlines, any industry should evaluate managed services from the cloud. Now, in theory, these managed services from clouds could be slightly more costlier than implementing and operating a similar service by themselves, but it takes away a lot of operational overhead. And I think the cost is, in most cases, is justified of choosing these managed services from the airlines. I would say event-driven designs are very much possible these days with very good products that support event-driven designs. It was slightly harder in the past. I guess airlines have to make a conscious choice of what is the future languages that we use, language runtimes that we use for developing systems. Pick a primary language like Java or TypeScript. Pick a secondary language for performance like Rust. Maybe possibly a third one for data, where they need to make data and generic automations. I think airlines also should invest into a data platform and a data access layer primarily. And I've seen certain systems like, for example, Neon or Hasura. These are products that make having a data access layer very, very easy to make, easy to build. So these could also be applied in a transformation program to quickly decouple systems, come up with an API-based model for your data alone. And if you think about front-end technologies, there's tons of options available. JavaScript-based frameworks are quite proven, like React. But when you adopt React, it would be a good idea to look into something like, okay, how do we introduce some structure into React development? Like, something like components using Storybook is something that the airlines could evaluate. And the list goes on. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of choices that needs to be made. But I guess, like I started in the beginning, the key thing is to take a closer look at the technology that you want to adopt, keep an open mind, not having to be tied down by technology that the organization is familiar with.
And you mentioned serverless technology, and I see now it has been a game changer in many industries. How does serverless architecture play a role in airline retailing platforms, and what are the advantages in terms of cost efficiency or scalability?
I think it plays a role in two ways, and serverless is a very broad definition. What exactly is serverless? I guess the answer depends on who you ask and their specific lens that they look at technology solutions. But in broad terms, serverless has brought in the possibility that most organizations can start designing systems without having to worry about variability in the volume of transactions that they need to deal with. And serverless is not the answer for every solution use case that is out there. But especially in the commercial domain, where the scaling or the cost challenge is inherently built into it. A quick example, you come up with a price promotion and suddenly the traffic volume increases for a limited period of time. So you need more compute, you need more storage. And then as the promotion wanes, the requirement for higher volumes goes down. So you need to scale up and down. And that's where serverless technologies really help. Plenty of options available on most cloud platforms today. ECS, the Elastic Compute Service that I am referring to, has a mode of deploying servers called Fargate, which is a managed serverless compute infrastructure. The advantage is that you design the solution to deal with a known volume of transactions, and then you horizontally scale when needed and scale down when you don't. Making a decision to, okay, let's scale up our infrastructure is as simple as going and making a change in a JSON file and then issue a deploy command, and then the cloud responds accordingly. This stuff is really easy these days. The other angle to serverless is that you now have SaaS solutions that are available in the market, which are also better priced, because even the SaaS vendors are able to make these serverless choices without having to worry about allocating quotas or to customers. So when an airline looks for a solution should be evaluated to see, is that flexible in terms of, if we have a higher need for that SaaS solution, can it scale? When we don't need it, can it scale down? It is really a game changer in the sense that it helps the teams think in terms of smaller solutions, which would then scale out at each of the solution layers and scale back in when there is no traffic volume.
And when launching a new digital product or platform, what metrics do you think are crucial for airlines to track in order to ensure they're delivering value to both their customers and stakeholders?
I think the first thing, again, in the commercial space where channels are involved, adoption rates are quite important, I think. You are often redirecting the customer from, let's say, an old website into a newly designed, better website. So the adoption rates across channels, which of my channels are more popular, that tracking the adoption rates is quite important. And once you have that tracked, I think it helps comparisons internally between the channels that an airline owns, for example, and then compare it with the general trends in the industry. What do other retailing industry players see as adoption rates? And look at other airlines, for example. So it gives you those opportunities to then compare and benchmark the channels that they offer. I also think, average transaction times is something that would be a good metric to track, because attention spans from customers are quite short these days. Everybody wants things done very quickly, and some of our experience is actually driven by Amazon, the Amazon experience. Mm-hmm. So airlines could look at average transaction times for, let's say, a shop to order flow or a reshop to order flow. Try and correlate this with, let's say, a customer retention metric, right? That we provide quick services. Is it making the customer come back to us more often, right? So that will be tracking average transaction times will be a good idea. You could look at various channel affinity metrics. If you look at channel affinity metrics, it helps us decide whether focusing or investing on a particular channel is much more rewarding than some other channel. So affinity metrics could be useful. And then there is a plethora of metrics that are introduced in the software development lifecycle. And the reason why I think they become important for airlines is nowadays automations to deliver software is quite easily done. And where there is automation, there is an opportunity to track a metric. And these metrics could be very useful in making sure that the cost of operating software systems will be much lower. And I don't want to name or list any, but this is standard software delivery processes. So any metric that is associated with it, useful for an airline, is something that I think airlines should be tracking.
Speaking now for professionals who are currently in the process of driving this digital transformation in their companies, what advice would you give them?
I guess I'll have to rely on what I tell myself. Joining a transformation program, I've often found that the goal that is set by the transformation program is quite far from where the current state of play is. So the gap might seem very wide, right? I guess the challenge will then be to break this down into smaller, proven patterns, go looking for proven patterns, smaller patterns. And I always think to myself that there is a roadmap. There is a way to get to that big goal by making steps and find a roadmap to get there. I also think it's important to consider the perspective of an outsider. And by outsider, what I mean is someone outside the organization, outside the industry. It's always good to consider an outsider's perspective, so that patterns that the team is not familiar with, the airline's internal teams are not familiar with, might come to the play and might help with a solution there. I guess the last thing is we are all influenced by how long we have spent on a certain set of systems, a certain set of processes. It's obviously an asset, but at some point we also have to question: is that constraining our thinking about future possibilities? So as long as that questioning is there, leveraging the experience is quite good, and keep the open mind towards things that might be outside our regular exposure. So I guess sometimes all it takes is a slight leap of faith.
And looking ahead now, what do you think the future holds for digital transformation in airline retailing, and what role do you think we Branchspace will have?
I think in the short term, airlines will catch up with the general retailing trends. So we will have, in the short term, an experience from airlines which is matching our thinking as a general consumer or a passenger who flies on planes. Airlines will match up with the retailing expectation. I get the right product, right price at the right time. And I think in the longer term, we will see that data and AI will play much greater impact in personalization. To look at an example, I would say my way of thinking about it is, right now, if you think about it, airlines generate, let's say, a personalized offer. Most airlines can do that, looking at what kind of a trip I'm likely to make. Is that going to be a business? Based on availability, they're able to make a very personalized offer for the passenger without the passenger realizing it. So I'm going to a comparison website and I'm seeing some prices, and my favorite airline is there, something that I prefer, without realizing that the airline has applied a personalized offer for that passenger. I think in the future, what will happen with AI agents and the future of personalization will be that I would actively expect my favorite airline to make me a personalized offer. I would sort of have the trust on that airline to get me that personalized offer, and that the current situation where I don't realize it will change, and I will have an active expectation on the airline. And I think what will play into that is the brand recognition that the airlines are trying to introduce. The work that is being done on better brand recognition, understanding the customer much more closer, the work that is happening in the retailing space will go a long way to get to that second stage, I think. And we at Branchspace are involved in all of these conversations where novel solutions in the air travel are being offered to customers. There was one particular project where IATA had demonstrated that you can have a touchless travel, meaning you just walk into an airport, you're recognized, your booking's there. These are the kind of projects that will make the passenger almost enjoy air travel as a seamless experience. And I'm very glad that I'm in Branchspace and have an exposure or a view into all these initiatives that are happening in the industry.
Well, thank you so much, Deepak. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure talking to you too.